right, so who are you? Who am I sitting next to?
Well, my name is David Oldham, and I am the founder of Constitutional Grounds. You can find us on Facebook/Constitutional Grounds.
So you had a post that had a huge response on the internet, and can you tell us a little bit about the premise of that post? And I mean, obviously, I want to talk about this post because I found it fascinating. However, I did want to say that David's involved in all kinds of activism. I think you were elector for the Electoral College, right?
I was.
And what is it known as, this area? Is it like a district or a precinct or?
It's by congressional district.
Okay, so you were District 1?
I was District 1 in Oklahoma.
Okay, very cool stuff. So this post, what is the discrepancy here? And the reason why I'm asking, the reason why David's on this is so important, that there is a big difference. If you say you're a constitutionalist, okay, constitutional conservative, there's kind of a wide berth of people that fit under that umbrella, and I'm glad that he brought this to my attention. I used to think the 10th Amendment folks were really on and really constitutional, and some of them may be. However, on this topic, it seems like the 9th Amendment really is what we need to be looking to as more of a guidance on these 10th Amendment issues. You have to look at the entire Bill of Rights. Is that the case? The entire Constitution? You can't just look at one amendment to kind of to dictate what you think?
Well, yes, but really what you have to do is you have to understand first of all, founding principles. That government is here to protect our rights. It's in the Declaration of Independence. For this reason, governments are formed to protect our rights. So understanding that, when you come to the Bill of Rights, you understand that the Bill of Rights, the rights that are secured by the Bill of Rights are to keep government from coming back later and saying, oh, we can violate that tyrannically, like the king had done. We're going to write it down, and thereby nobody can come back later and claim dominion.
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm nowhere near the scholar you are on the Constitution, even the Federalist Papers, and some founding documents, but it seems like these enumerated powers given the Constitution were really to limit the power of government and to unleash the power, the reflection of the innate powers and rights the individual has given by God, but to tie the hands of government, so to speak, or is that the wrong way to look at it? Yes,
some have said it's to handcuff government. And yes, in matters of right, their power is limited. They are not to violate your rights. Now, when we stop and think, we got to talk about what is a right, because we have people claiming rights that are not rights.
You have a right to the internet, right?
I have a right.
You have a right to marry anyone you'd like.
Well, I have a right to use any service that is provided by another, and willingly, voluntarily, we make a transaction for my use of it. So the internet is a service that is put out there, and they willingly let me use their service.
Do you have a right to marry any individual you'd like?
Sure.
Okay.
No, the problem is that marriage should be a province of the church, and the church's affairs and what they said about marriage is supposed to be outside of government. So the church can excommunicate any homosexual from marrying, for instance. But the government is not supposed to be delving into ecclesiastical matters.
Right. So you look at marriage, and it's an institution that's far older than government, and it's an institution that is religious. I mean, I don't really see marriage in the Constitution. Do you?
Well, no. And when you understand the prohibitions on marriage that were placed by governments, primarily it was racially based. It was to prevent interracial marriage primarily, and then and supposedly it was to prevent first cousins or brethren from marrying.
Some light eugenics.
Yes. Well, no, not light eugenics. It was to keep the
dysgenics.
well, I don't know what you would call it. Anyway, it was supposed to keep inbreeding from happening.
Prevent this.
Supposedly. But really it was to keep people who ultimately the government at hand did not want marrying each other.
Yeah.
The question comes, where is it government's authority? Where do they find some right to violate your rights?
Well, they're better than God, because God didn't, withhold the rights of marriage from Moses and I suppose, what was it, the Ethiopian woman? Was that his wife? She was an African lady. Correct?
Yes.
And so many people in the Israelite camp are very upset about this in the Bible.
Sure.
But, it was, God didn't have a problem with it. But the state could have a problem with it.
But they can't.
How is this?
They can't have a problem with it. And what prompted the article was a statement by a former senatorial candidate in North Carolina. Now, he wasn't the first one who said it, but he's the one that finally got my goat, and I had to write it down. He said that the federal government may not violate your Second Amendment rights, but the states may, because the state, the Bill of Rights.
We came up against a similar argument in our first congressional district election, a Republican primary runoff, correct?
Yeah.
Kevin Hearn believed, as I think as we do, we'll clarify this, that the Second Amendment has supremacy over any state law.
Correct.
To give you unfettered access to firearms, as long as there's a legal transfer of the firearms, a legal purchase of firearms. Essentially,
how do you have an illegal purchase when the
right
shall not be infringed?
Cannot be infringed. Exactly.
So how do you
There's
have
no
an
such
illegal
thing
purchase?
as an illegal gun, right? I mean, constitutionally, is that correct?
Correct.
I mean, it gets me on this, and we'll go back to this issue in the first district. Believe me, we'll come back to it.
Well,
this illegal gun thing, this fully automatic gun. I'd love to pull up this news article. We got the computer on. We're being lit by the beautiful the CFL panel in front of us.
It's a great lighting.
I wish you could see it. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's like a studio. This big 55-inch LED TV or whatever. But this fella, he's a military veteran. He served honorably. And now he's going to prison for a very long time because I believe 30 to 40 years ago, he purchased an M14 rifle that was fully automatic, illegally, and it had the serial numbers crossed out, which I believe these are two offenses. You couldn't buy the fully automatic weapon, and you can't buy a weapon with the serial number crossed out. I mean, is that constitutional? Should he be in prison?
No, let's go back to founding principles. The revolution was supposedly started. It didn't start here, but it was really kicked off supposedly with the shot heard around the world. We're familiar with that, right? That term.
Right. Crispus Attucks, right? That was the Boston Massacre.
No. The shot
this
heard.
Is before.
The shot heard. No, this is later. The Boston Massacre was in 1775. Okay. Well, 1770. Yeah, early 1775. But the battles of Lexington and Concord.
Yeah.
Okay. What and in there was the shot that nobody knows who fired it.
All right.
And that kicked off the real hostilities.
It was Han Solo and Greedo, right? No one knows who shot first. See, I know my history,
and
guys.
I'm not a Star Wars person to know all that.
At the Boston Massacre, it was Han Solo and Greedo, and that's what you needed to take away from this.
Okay, well there you go.
True history.
I have learned something.
This will be in your children's history text, no doubt. It'll be about Han Solo and Greedo. That's about as historically accurate as what you get in most of these historical texts.
It is, but the question is for those, what were the British regulars going to Lexington and Concord for?
They were taking the guns, right?
They were there to get guns.
Just like Mao, just like Stalin,
cannon,
just like Hitler.
But it was cannon and shot as well as the light arms.
Well, where's the Second Amendment end? You certainly can't own cannons.
Oh, that's the whole foundation of our country and the context in which they wanted to protect our rights was into the whatever you can imagine in terms of arms. We can individually.
Right, they simply say arms.
Yes.
I mean, that could be anything.
Anything.
We call nuclear weapons nuclear arms. As a matter of fact, some people say, argument ad absurdum, right? They take it to the most extreme extent of the argument, and well, what, can you own cannons? Well, yeah, actually, can you own tanks? People ask this all the time. People do own tanks. Do you know that?
Yeah,
there are thousands of tanks with military-grade munitions, cannons, 76mm cannons, what have you, that have, you know, hundreds of times the kinetic energy of the gun I carry on my hip every day, okay? And how many people die per year? How many people are killed due to illegal activity or any activity with these tanks?
None so far.
So far.
But the point is that we have to have them to protect ourselves from tyrannical government.
You don't have to own a tank. First of all, okay, you own a tank, it's not an Abrams tank. They don't sell it to you. It's like a Sherman tank or a Stewart. And it's going to get run over by a SWAT vehicle or something. Yeah. It's going to kill you in that thing. So that's not protecting anybody's rights.
No, but they will serve a purpose in smaller skirmishes and things like that. But the point is that we should even be having Abrams tanks and other things if we could afford it. Quite frankly, we own all those Abrams tanks that could be turned against us.
What about the Apache helicopters?
Absolutely.
But that isn't that
as well as F-18s, F-22s.
Well, isn't that appropriation because it's called an Apache or a Comanche helicopter? Isn't that cultural appropriation? Shouldn't that be illegal to appropriate?
Hey, I didn't name them. They fly good.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's interesting. No, citizens can't own them, but we can sure as heck give them to the Iraqi military for free, and they can sure as heck be terrible stewards of everything we give them, and ISIS can sure as heck commandeer these vehicles, and then we've got to pay to destroy our own tanks and helicopters because, you know, we just willy-nilly give them to these foreign entities, but, you know, that's interesting, yeah. So the Second Amendment, textually, has no limit to the arms. Is that correct?
Yes.
There's no limit. So I mean, and by the way, people do own military jets, private jets. You can own Sabres or MiGs. People own those. They fly
most
around.
of us can't afford the latest generations.
You can't do it, but people do. You know, they're anti-aircraft cannons. Real cannons today. A cannon, for those of you that aren't ammo-sexuals such as myself. You might not know that a cannon, the nomenclature is the difference between a gun and a cannon. Why it's a 50 caliber gun and not a cannon is it doesn't have explosive filler. It's just the propellant to you know, a ball projectile or some kind of projectile that is non-explosive. A cannon contains explosive filler, and so typically your minimum cannon size is around 14.5 millimeter or 55 caliber. That would be really small. That's kind of, you know, an odd size. Really about 20 millimeter. You had a 20 millimeter cannon. It's what the F-16s use and a lot of other weapon systems use. And so that's a cannon. Now, people own 40 millimeter cannons. And we're talking the energy here. It has the capability of shooting down an aircraft. Certainly any commercial airliner. And thousands of them are privately owned and furnished on private property. And guess how many people have been killed with these weapons of mass destruction, according to the media? Big zero. So I mean, it seems like the bigger the arms, the lower the danger to society. The more powerful the arm, the less of a risk it bears upon society.
The only danger is against the tyrant. And I mean, that's the only real concern.
Well, certainly one of these guys could be crazy and kill a bunch of people.
Well, of course. Well, that has happened. The guy,
never with an anti-aircraft. With guns, though.
With tanks, there was a guy that was running over cars and things like that.
When did that happen?
This was back in the 90s, and he was running things. He ran amok, but he did not own that. He stole it from an armory.
Well, that's, I mean, so that doesn't count. That's why the civilian number is still zero. He didn't
own
it legally. He stole this thing.
No, there's been some movies. James Garner was starring a movie that I think he did some of that. But
you don't know him.
There was a guy who, and I don't remember if it was a tank or if he, I think it was a tank, and he did own it privately, and he did go running amok. He tore down some guy's store or something like that in a little town.
Property
in the
damage,
Midwest.
right?
Mostly, I don't think so, but they ended up having to go get him as well. But anyway, the thing is that the bigger the gun, generally the fewer people are killed by it. And in fact, guns kill fewer people than knives or clubs every year.
That's true. And some would argue, maybe somewhat pedantically, that guns have never killed anybody. It's people that kill people. They're just an instrument.
Well, yes,
I know you would agree with that.
Excuse me. Forgive my semantic.
A bit pedantically.
It's absolutely
there is a distinction there, and we all understand. But just to clarify, in case someone believes that.
But here's the thing. What the article was about was that they said that you cannot infringe it from the federal level, but the states may.
Now we're getting back to the 9th and 10th Amendment issue here.
Correct.
So some people, typically from what you see, when someone starts talking on the 10th Amendment, probably a conservative person that believes in individual liberty and almost always. And it's considered to be like one of these this is like the pinnacle of conservatism. But really, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of these people are arguing for the tyranny of the individual states rather than the federal government.
Absolutely. In fact, I call it the divine right of state. Back in our revolutionary times, it was the divine right of kings. That the kings, just a little history, the kings, since the Magna Carta, had signed away some of their divine right as monarch, because under divine right,
the power is given to them by God.
All power for his entire dominion is encompassed in the king, and then he disposes of it to individuals at his good pleasure and as he willed. And so if you didn't get it, you had to come to him and ask him permission to do whatever you wanted. Well, at our founding, and the kings had signed away more and more rights and given the general public more and more rights to be free men and not serfs. Well, we come to our founding and we said we're all free. We're all born equal. There is none of this divine right encompassed in a single. It's encompassed in the whole, and every single one of us have all of the rights of every other.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'd agree. Yeah.
So when we get to the Constitution, the arguments weren't over whether we should violate somebody's rights or not. It was how will we protect the rights of the individual, and what are the mechanisms that we need to put in place so that tyranny doesn't rear its ugly head once again.
What were those mechanisms?
Well, that's the mechanisms of the legislature and the president and the judiciary being in separate powers. The states having a check on the federal government as well.
What effect is it when, let's say, hypothetically, you have like some kind of ballot initiative, so hypothetically maybe in the state of California,
right.
and maybe hypothetically we'll call it Proposition 8, and hypothetically 63% of the population votes one way, and then a judge sees that and they say, no, gay marriage is now the law of the land, and the state will officiate these marriages. Is that like that judge writing a law, like he's a member of the legislature, or not really? Well,
that gets into what you bring up gets into a lot more difficult a situation. The thing is, the government shouldn't have been in the business of marriage in the first place. If the government wasn't in the business of marriage, then
I agree.
Unconstitutionally.
Let's take that out of there. Let's just make up something. It is something. The
Let's stick with guns, because guns is really simple. So the Oklahoma Constitution says I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it up in front of me.
Every able-bodied man, right?
No, it does not. It says that we. Well, yes, it does. It says that, but what it says is that your right to you shall always be allowed to keep and bear arms. That shall not be infringed, except. And then it goes in and lists some exceptions, and establishes that the state really can infringe your rights as they see fit.
It's so weird that Woody Guthrie would put that in our Constitution when he wrote it. So weird.
Somehow I don't think he was around then.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, the point was the point is that the state has actually made a constitutional amendment that is unconstitutional federally.
So, according to the 10th Amendment advocates, Oklahoma's right.
Well, some of the 10th Amendment advocates believe that that the states are not bound to protect rights. What they believe is that the states, although supposedly have some sort of ethereal duty, but they don't live it, and so how are we ever going to get them to do it? They do not. They believe that the states can actually be wholly tyrannical, make any edict about anything they want, because their power is general under the 10th Amendment. They have powers reserved to them, not given to the federal government. And that is what the 10th Amendment says. But it says that powers are reserved to the people, to the states and the people respectively. So not everything is given to the government. Some things are still reserved to the people. But those are powers. And there's a difference between powers and rights. Powers, just power. You can do things because you have power. But rights trump legal powers, legal authorities. So somebody can have the power to do me harm, but they don't have the legal right to violate my rights. I don't have the right to violate yours. Do I have the power? Yes.
But
Governments have
I have the power to violate your rights if you hurt my feelings, though.
Well, and that's what's being argued right now.
If
I have feelings, and my feelings take precedence over your speech. And it's like, no. You don't have the right to. You don't have the right to impose upon me and dictate how I must behave, whether it be speech or anything else. I have the right to speech.
The Supreme Court ruled on that. You have compelled speech. The Supreme Court ruled that you can be compelled to participate. And I hate to come back to this. I really don't care about the gay marriage issue so much outside of these constitutional issues, because it's got much wider implications than gay folks getting married or not. I really don't care much about that. But if the government can compel you to do one thing, under the rule of law, under a precedent, could it not compel you to do other things? I mean, it opens the floodgates, correct?
Absolutely.
So it's compelled speech. The government can compel you under the gay wedding cake, the gay cake ruling, as I like to call it, that they can compel your speech. It is expression to do any kind of artistic task, whether it's singing, or whatever you do, for work, whatever it is, that's your expression. It's expressing yourself.
Well, it's completely. I mean, who wants a wedding cake from somebody who doesn't want to provide it? Maybe I'm a cake baker, but I don't want to provide wedding cakes for anybody. But a guy comes and says, "You bake cakes. I really like your cakes. I want you to make me a wedding cake." Can they force me to make a wedding cake when that's not what I do? That's one question. Okay. Number two question is, can they then force me to decorate it with where I am coming up with something out of thin air that nobody else can come up with over something that I don't, that I completely disagree with?
So they can compel you to buy, I guess, health insurance then too.
No.
Well, they compel you to buy car insurance.
Well, not legally.
Is that the same thing?
Well, no. Even the car insurance is a scheme against the poor, because the poor who can't afford it, and all you have to do is turn on the TV, look at the commercials, and they're talking about poor who can't afford their car insurance. They have to decide to get food or ride the bus or something else.
You're a moron, and let me explain to you why you're a moron here. So these poor people end up becoming far poorer when they don't have insurance to pay for the things that break, like their bodies or their vehicles, that they don't have insurance for.
Right.
And so all we have to do is penalize these people for not having enough money.
We have to educate them.
With a fine.
Right.
So the poor people who are poor will make them poorer by charging them these huge exorbitant fines for not buying a product that they didn't buy in the first place because they're poor.
I don't know how you got that.
Does it make sense?
That's exactly what they do.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing, except it violates the rights of the poor.
Except it violates the rights, and it's illogical, right? I mean,
no
logic, whatever.
Well, the thing is that we have to keep a working class who's hungry so that they will work for lower wages.
Well, they've got to vote Democrat too, because
Well,
then they have
that's
they've got the grievances.
Well, that's a separate
It's
issue.
good
I mean,
that people are
I don't know
poor.
all the motives, but I do know that there is a vested interest in keeping a working class a working class. In other words, keep them at subsistence level. When I
Doesn't
was
really
selling
make
cars,
sense with robots.
well, that's
What
the
about
point,
robots?
because they're always they're cheaper than even.
So we won't
paying
have
for
a
somebody
lower
at
class
subsistence.
when we have robots.
No, we're gonna have an even lower class.
Okay. Predictions with Dave.
There we go. Anyway, the thing is that if they're violating rights, if they can violate rights, if they have this dominion over us from which they can then dish out rights to us, and we don't really have any rights except those that they grant us, then we are back to where we left
Well, so the
200
people,
plus years
it's
ago.
what the people beg for, though. Don't the people
They're
ordain this at the ballot box?
You brought up the Bible. That's what the Jews wanted to go back to Egypt, right? And
It'd be better for them, I think.
and they begged for meat when they had it all that they wanted.
Well, we
They
don't want to get
wanted
into, what
meat.
is it, Second Chronicles or Second Kings? I'll have to check it out, where Israel demands a king, and God said, well, listen, I don't want you to have a king, but if you really want one, you can have it. And then he talks about the pathology of government, essentially. And he says, he's going to send your sons to war. He's going to take your choicest pieces of property.
Sure.
He's going to tax you. He's going to take your daughters and your vineyards, and he's going to be an all-around scumbag. But, hey, have it your way at the Burger King. And ever since then, it was a love story, and Israel only had good kings. Except it's the opposite. There were no good kings of Israel, essentially, except for David, and he killed the guy to marry his wife, so...
Yeah.
I don't know if that would fly in today's politics.
Well, it wasn't to marry
Mr.
his wife,
Trump-
it was to hide his sin.
Yes, to hide
And
his
anywhere in his
infidelity.
life.
Yeah, something. Yeah, maybe they were married. They fornicated. I don't know. Listen, I'm not a theologian.
It was blatant adultery.
It was pretty bad.
It was blatant adultery.
Would that guy be elected if he ran and he was like, "Listen, I am the greatest king,
Well, he
ordained
didn't-
by God after God's order"? However, I did this. Just
Anyway.
one thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I killed this dude, and I had
Well-
relations with his wife. I mean, I don't think he'd be elected today if that was.
He later on shared all that, but that was later, and he had and politics was even there. David had politics that he had to deal with, and he had things that he couldn't get done that he tasked Solomon to do. So
He couldn't build the temple, but I don't know. Was that related essentially because he,
No, that was,
shed
he was
blood?
prevented.
Yeah.
He gathered everything for it, but he was prevented by God because he was a shedder of blood. And specifically, that was a divine. He was divinely kept from building the temple.
Now, is this a discussion you could have in a public school? I mean, it's inappropriate, correct?
Well, it should be.
To have
It
this
should
discussion.
be something that you could have in a public school.
Well, why
because
isn't it?
Because the separation of church and state is nothing like what is portrayed.
Well, okay, how's it portrayed?
Well, that if you're in a government school, you may not talk about religion whatsoever. And
Where does it say that in the Constitution?
well, it doesn't. And
What
again,
does?
going back to founding principles, that's not even a concept. We go all the way back to John Locke, Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, saved the revolution in March of 1776. They talked about how religion needed to be the church needed to be in the province of religion and ecclesiastical matters, and those needed to be protected from government.
Right, that's the whole idea of separation of church and state, correct? Or
Correct. It does not mean that you can't have church in the government.
yeah, it's freedom of religion, not freedom from religion.
Exactly.
That's what a lot of people like to argue.
Well, and that's the thing.
Which is hilarious because those people belong to another religion, typically called secular humanism or atheism,
Sure.
which is simply just assuming, and it is a belief, a philosophical belief, in naturalism or materialism.
Or Darwinism.
And these are just,
evolution.
it's the same, it's belief, right? Simply having a belief is on the same level across the board. It is something for which you cannot objectively prove. And so I think all beliefs should be, I think constitutionally, is that correct? All beliefs are considered equal in,
Yes.
in terms of their protection. Not in their
Yes.
validity, but in terms of their protection
No, in
from
fact,
the government.
in fact, the founders were very clear certainly the philosophers, and they were consistent on this, and the founders, these were the philosophers that the founders followed, and this was the political thought for 100 years in this country. And so this is not something that's shocking or should be shocking to us. If we were taught history and civics, this would be ordinary. This would not be novel.
People aren't interested in that, though. That's
well, of course not, because it's not football or some some
yeah. If we had a quarter of the people that painted themselves, blue or red or whatever, 20 below to scream for their favorite sports ball team. If we had a quarter of those people that got involved in politics on the right side of issues, we wouldn't have any. I think any significant political issues in the country are not resolved.
And really, all it takes is becoming jealous for your rights, and realize that rights of your neighbors are also yours. So if your neighbor is having his rights violated, you're having yours violated.
Yes.
Okay? You may not exercise that particular right. Think drugs. I'm not a drug user, but I take it very personally when they say I cannot use this or that.
I love caffeine. I'm an addict.
Well, that's fine.
I start my day off with caffeine.
Well, there you go.
I'm not going to have a day.
But is it an abuse? Are you a drug abuser?
I sometimes
shake
from how much caffeine I drink. After the 4th or 5th espresso,
there you go.
I'm shaking.
Well, so I'd have probably stopped at 3 at the very latest.
Well, only if you get more than 2 hours of sleep.
Well, okay. For me, I stay sleepy. I just shake. So really, the thought for 100 years was that. What was I talking about? Because I've completely lost my train of thought.
You're talking about freedom of religion, not from religion.
Well, the freedom of religion is that the people in the religion needed to share their religion. For instance, if I'm in the truth, I need to convince you if you're not. And that needs to be a mutually agreed upon
it's
conversation.
Not the role of the state.
And the state has to stay out of it. You can't go to the state and say, hey, I don't like what this guy's saying, so shut him up for me.
What element of the Constitution is this? Where is separation of church and state found in the Constitution or the founding documents?
You would find it in the First Amendment as far as
freedom of religion.
But because that's what it is.
But there's no such thing as separation, I think, of church and state. I think that's included in a letter. Like
No. Well, the way
it's the concept, the legal concept.
But even then, what they do is they take it out of context,
right?
To get it to say what they want it to say. Yes. They spin it, they twist it. Yeah. It's the spin doctors. They've been around forever, and so they twist what Thomas Jefferson wrote, because what he was writing was consistent with Locke and Thomas Paine, because that's who he followed. And that was the thought at the time. So when he's talking about one thing, they say, oh, he's talking about this, and believe me. And if you believe them, then you're not following what Jefferson said. You're following what some guy said about Jefferson, and he's lied. So if you follow liars, then there's part of the problem.
Let's get the 9th Amendment. Why, in your view, the 9th Amendment should be focused on more than the 10th Amendment? And by the way, don't get the impression that there's an amendment. I mean, we're pro-Constitution here, right? Unless I'm mistaken. We like the 9th and the 10th Amendment. The issue is the proper exercise of these amendments in the Bill of Rights. So what is the proper role of the 9th Amendment?
So the difference between the 9th and the 10th is the 9th talks about rights, the 10th talks about powers.
And rights trump powers, correct?
Rights always trump powers. Now, you can use your power wrongly. To violate rights. And we see that all the time.
Government does it.
We see that
constantly.
And the entire point of the Constitution, the entire point of governments at that time, and the Founding Fathers was, how are we going to make it so that future governments will not violate rights with the power we give them and the power that the people give them. And so the 9th Amendment is actually the most important amendment in one sense. And that is, it covers the vast majority of your life. Anything not included in Amendments 1 through 8 is covered in the ninth. So we have a catch-all to all you can imagine as a right. The question is, testing it, is it a right?
Is it a right for me to make internet memes?
Yes.
They couldn't have conceived of internet memes in
Sure.
the 1790s.
But are you a free... The question is, are you a free man?
It's debatable.
Well, no. Okay, well, let's go back. Let's go back because again, the founders discussed being free from the point of nature. If you're alone in nature, you're free to make any decision you wish because you're alone. You have to make all decisions. You're the only person to rely on for your decisions. You and God. Okay, so you are completely free. Now you come into contact with other people, and all of a sudden there may be somebody who tries to assert some dominance over you, and you might have a fight. Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is that if enough people come and assert their dominance over you, you might have to be submissive to them. You're no longer free. Okay? But the point was that if we're all born equal, well, let's go back one more step. So you take that, and while you might have to fight for just to keep your stuff and keep your life, and you might have to fight all the time, depending upon the evil of the people around you. Well, what you might do is you might get some friends together and say, hey, let's live close to each other so that when these people come, we can gang up on them and we can dominate over them and just protect ourselves.
Assert our rights.
Assert our rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property.
If a right can't be asserted, it doesn't exist.
Well, it exists, but it's being violated.
In practical
terms.
Practically, it doesn't exist if you can't assert your rights. I mean, you know.
Correct. So what we have is in America, we're free men. We're born free men. So if you're born a free man, then you can make whatever decision you wish as long as it doesn't harm another. Your rights end where my nose begins, as Thomas Jefferson said.
Okay, well, what about microaggressions? Oh, right? You're harming me.
Well, dreamt up
You're making me cry.
offenses.
Earlier. I'm proud to be an American. So that terrible gesture I was doing where I'm like, I'm tired.
You're not
like,
a snowflake.
American.
You're not a snowflake.
No,
so
I mean, listen, my feelings get hurt all the time. Sometimes people, they say mean words, and they say a mean word, and I react emotionally. I break down and cry. Like, imagine that in traffic, someone they did. I'm not even going to talk about with an unfriendly gesture. They used a very mean gesture that I'm going to really discuss in detail here, and I just stopped doing things that week. I curled up in the fetal position. I was in a car accident. I was struck because I just stopped. I stopped operating my vehicle to curl up into the fetal position because of that microaggression, and they caused me to get into a car accident.
Okay.
Did they have that right to hurt my feelings so much that it caused me?
Yes, actually, they did.
Why is that? I feel like they aggressed against me. I don't feel like that's the right.
Well, where was the aggression?
He's very aggressive in his gestures. He assaulted me with words and gesture.
How is that an assault?
Well, it made me feel uncomfortable, unsafe.
Well, that it made you... Did he threaten you? Physically?
Well, I mean,
directly.
He waved his hand at me.
Oh, he waved his hand at you in a gesture.
Yeah, in a gesture.
Okay, well, that's not an assault.
It's not an assault?
No, because that was communication.
So it's not...
That was just communication.
He didn't violate my rights then?
No, there's no violation of rights.
Well, maybe I was just a moron for curling up in the fetal position and letting a gesture
I will let you decide
ruin my week. Possibly. Okay.
So the thing is, and that you raise a good point, is what is a right? You don't have the right to have everybody make you feel good. That's not a right because they may not feel like making you feel good, and you cannot impose upon them because then what? They become a slave to you. Well, but that's not equal anymore.
Healthcare is a human right. UN
you have the right to health care.
UN said that it's a human right. They're even bigger than the United States. The United States, that government, the Constitution, governs what happens here. in the contiguous United States, Hawaii, and Alaska. But the UN, they dictate what happens around the entire world, and they said that healthcare is a human right. So
well, their constituent countries don't even uphold that. So,
but what if
practically
they did?
It doesn't exist, right?
What if they did? What if they did? We have to submit to that. I mean, the world government has supremacy over the United States government, does it? Does it not?
No.
Why not?
Not unless we grant it supremacy.
Okay, well, we might do that sometime. Sounds like a good idea.
Well, the people can decide to do that. It's currently not constitutional, and
through an amendment,
any president or senator who approves something like that should be impeached, and deservedly so. Again, we lost the state control or the state sake in the federal government with the 17th Amendment and the direct election of senators. The state legislatures prior to the 17th Amendment chose the senators. Well, the reason for doing that was so that the states had a say in what Congress did. And there was a serious check from the state governments on the federal government saying no, don't do that, because the Senate could veto not vote for anything the House passed.
Well, direct democracy is the best kind of democracy. I know because I heard someone say that once. What's your argument against that?
That was probably Hillary or somebody like that. The thing is that we do not have a direct democracy.
But I hear everyone talk about democracy all
we
the time.
are a democracy only in the sense that we, the people, hold the power. That's what democracy means.
We have democratic functions like voting,
We do.
I think of it.
But
it's not all of government.
Well, we elect representatives. We are supposed to be a constitutional republic.
Yeah.
And so we are a republic because we hire representatives, an elector to the electoral college.
Bill Day missed that in our educational forum somehow. He kept saying we're a democracy. And I think I corrected him at that education forum. I said, no, we're a constitutional republic.
Well,
and there's an important distinction. Because if we're a democracy, we get to do all the mob stuff.
Correct.
That these rhinos and dinos and Democrats want to do. Well, then if we're simply a democracy, 51 out of 100 of us could vote to cannibalize the other 49, and then that's just a legal, rational, and appropriate function of government. But, we actually protect the rights of individuals here, do we not?
Correct. Well, we're supposed to.
Well, yeah, in theory.
The government is supposed to. And therein lies the problem. The governments, both federal and state, have flipped our founding principles and actually our laws on their heads. The government is supposed to be securing your rights. That is what they are there for. And they have flipped it on its head, and they are saying, no, we have tyrannical power, and we can dictate to you anything we wish. And that's what has happened. In Oklahoma, we have a sin tax. We can tax you because we don't like cigarette smokers.
That's bad
and
for
cigarette
you.
smoking, it's bad for you. You should quit. Yeah. So therefore, we're going to tax you, so you have to quit.
It's the state's role to protect its citizenry, and they're just protecting the folks.
But it's not just that. It's about disparaging people they don't like. So drug users, people carrying something in their pocket, and an inert substance in a plastic bag, unless you utilize it, it's inert unless you utilize it.
Yeah.
It does not harm anybody. You carrying it in your pocket, it doesn't jump out and harm anybody.
Well, I saw this movie where a guy had acid in his pocket and he walked through sprinklers and he about died from that acid trip. I guess
he did that to himself.
Theoretically, though, someone else could be on a slip and slide and collide into him,
and that would then harm him.
This child would be harmed.
Well, that would be something he should be held accountable for if that was to be the case.
To me, and we've talked about stuff like this before. I mean, we have these stupid, redundant laws, like gun laws. Okay, listen, any crime you could commit with a gun, you could commit without the gun. There's nothing inherent to having the tool of the gun that is more felonious, or more criminal.
Well,
same thing with drugs.
Hate crimes.
Yeah.
I mean, wait a minute. A crime was committed. A murder was committed. We're going to charge him with hate crimes on top of it? I mean, what does that matter? I mean, if we're actually doing things right and we're using the death penalty properly, then there's no need for the hate crime.
I love Matt and Trey Parker, I think, the creators of they said something like, well, you sure don't murder somebody because you love them.
Exactly.
Like, every violent crime's a hate crime. What are you talking about? Hate crimes are redundant. Anything that's a hate crime is a crime otherwise, right?
Right.
Unless, see, what they're trying to do is manipulate the language and your emotions to say that, well, if he hurts my feelings, if he says a bad word, well, that's a crime now. Because he's actually not committed any real violation of my rights.
Yes, there's that. Yeah.
But additionally, the drugs, any crime you can commit while you're on drugs, you commit while you're off drugs, right? And you drive into plow into someone, that's vehicular manslaughter. Well, if you had too much to drink, okay, it's not the fault of the alcohol, it's your fault that you are not maintaining control of your vehicle. It's
Correct.
the same outcome.
Correct.
Whether you were sober or it doesn't matter. Adding that tier of, well, because you were intoxicated.
Well, the problem is that they give them a pass because they were intoxicated, and that's the problem. Because hey, I'm intoxicated, I can't remember what I did, so therefore I can't defend myself in court, and then they get a pass. Or because
that's what happened with Kavanaugh. I remember. That's what happened. That's what they said.
Well.
Unless they're a conservative, then he's got to know. And then when he presents this, like, impossible, who in the world has this itinerary of everything they did, like, their senior year or their freshman year in college or something, and he had it. And they're like, well, very convenient, this weaponized accusation where none of the details can be questioned because, the accusation doesn't include the where, the when, most of the who's, who drove you there, who drove you back, what year was it? What state was it in? It's like, so it's a weaponized because it's indefensible. There's no way you could prove it. Even if you have this awesome itinerary, you can't account for 100% of the time. And so it was totally malicious. But
on that one, the accusation is all. And we face the same. I faced the same thing in 2016. Claims of collusion, Russia collusion, no proof.
Wait, you were
demanded that
you were accused of being a Russian bot?
Oh no, not me. But I was supposed to root out all this collusion. That it's like, show me some evidence, and I'm happy. But I'm in Tulsa. How am I going to root out?
Explain the scenario. Who tasked you with rooting out collusion?
Oh, I got over 1,000 letters requesting that from around the country. I have friends in Texas, one of whom received 100,000 pieces of correspondence, and I think he ended up creating an automated response, and everybody got a response.
Was this in your function as an elector?
Yeah. But the same thing happened. It was all accusation, absolutely no substance. And here you had the same thing.
Well, no, we know that Russia spent $80,000 in Facebook ads. That's all the proof you need.
Wasn't even available at the time. That didn't come out for quite a while.
You mean the fact that Russia spends money on ads isn't proof that they have some vast conspiracy to elect a certain president?
We do that in other countries. We've been doing that forever.
Right. Well, I think it's funny because I think China spent $400,000 in advertisement to influence the United States elections in 1996. So, given inflation, over 20 years ago, that's actually way more money than $80,000 today.
The Chinese
and it was pro-Clinton, period. Whereas the Russians, this $80,000 they spent on Facebook ads, actually a slim majority of them were anti-Trump. Because if you look at the actual intelligence report that the 13 agencies agreed on, it simply was that Russia had an operation to undermine confidence in the American electoral process. And that's it. But they spin it, and the Democrats spin it to say essentially that they had an operation to elect Donald Trump,
right? Which
wasn't true. And this tiny amount of money, a lot of it was used for anti-Trump or anti-conservative ads.
The thing is that I'm
not... the hilarious part is the media actually fulfilled the task set out by Russia in undermining confidence in the election because they still simply assert that Trump is somehow illegitimate because Putin himself selected Trump to be like a double KGB agent. We were discussing this earlier.
Is the media working for Russia?
They must be Russian. They must all be Russian. So they certainly are rushing to accuse and rushing to conclusions. So yeah, maybe they're rushing.
Well, when President Obama rushed to conclusions and was demonstrated to be wrong on multiple occasions.
He's never been wrong.
Oh, he was.
Not
I mean,
one time.
don't you remember
I heard it on CNN. He's not been wrong
No,
once.
the beer summit happened for a reason. Do you remember that?
Yes, and he wasn't wrong. That cop was objectively racist. He said that he got up that morning trying to commit a hate crime. Wasn't that what happened?
Is that what they said?
I mean, basically, if you get...
Oh, I mean, the beer summit happened because Obama had to make nice. So he invited the cop to the White House to drink some of his beer that he made.
In the
basement
professor,
of the White House.
In the professor, too. I didn't know that. Obama had a microbrewery?
Oh, he's a brewer. He
Wow.
makes his own beer.
That's
so,
cool.
Yeah, he was...
I totally am not upset about all of his constitutional violations.
because he's a microbrewer.
He's a relatable guy. Yeah. Hey, did you hear? I think I heard that Hitler liked dogs and children.
He was good with
Hitler. Good on dogs and
all
children.
the women loved him. That's why he couldn't marry Eva Braun for all that time, because he had to remain single, married to the country, and because the women all fawned over him and wanted to be his.
My favorite thing about the Russia collusion, going back to that, was how Trump played the media, and he said, "Oh, this election's rigged," and I think he knew exactly what he was doing, because immediately. I love it. I play this clip all the time with Barack Obama talking about how it's impossible to rig a United States presidential election. And so we forever have this clip of Obama explaining all the ways, how it's decentralized and how it's just infeasible for the election to really be swayed by an outside party. And now, of course, the Democrats, the media flip-flop. They're just expecting you to have the memory of a gnat, which, unfortunately, their cynical calculation is correct for about 90-something% of the population. They simply don't remember or care that the media proclaimed that Trump was insane. No one could ever rig the election. Obama went into great detail how it was unriggable.
It does not matter the side, which party you're in. Political memories are short. It is a maxim. It is out there. Everybody knows it, and unless you're really attuned to these things, you will forget. It is an extreme few that remember these things, from year to year and on into the future.
What is the Article 6 element of what you're discussing? Article 6 of the Constitution. Where does this play a role in this 9th and 10th Amendment debate?
Well, the argument is that the 6th Amendment, which is the supremacy of the Constitution and the laws of the United States, made in pursuance of the Constitution. In other words, that they agree with the Constitution. They're not repugnant or anti-constitutional. That those are the supreme laws of the land, and that the states and the judges, both in the federal and the states, are bound by them. So after Article 6 was ratified, we get or certainly presented to the states, and during ratification, we have the Bill of Rights come out. So the Constitution was sent to be ratified in 1787. The Bill of Rights is introduced in 1789.
It's ratified in 91.
I don't remember exactly what year everything was finally ratified, but they had to get 3/4 of the states to ratify them.
1791.
And I believe it's 91. 91 I believe was the...
Guys, just anyway, move on.
So, anyway, the Bill of Rights comes out after Article 6. So the context of the Bill of Rights is everybody knows that it's going to be the supreme law of the land. And that's what people are arguing against now. And it is what John Marshall, back in 1833, John Marshall was the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He wrote a decision, Barron v. Baltimore, Google it, in which he denied a man his constitutional rights by saying that the Bill of Rights did not apply to the states. And that is what is being argued now.
So it's the precedent.
And that is the precedent.
It's settled, man.
And after which, everybody now is arguing as though that is some great historic event setting everything, and it's not. Now here comes to a major point that I want to point out. The people in black robes are not the final arbiters of the Constitution or of our laws.
Wait, that's their role. That's literally their role. That's why they're called the Supreme Court.
No, they are not. Courts. Remember, who do they get their power from? It's from us. We the people. And they get their just powers by the consent of the governed. So if we remove our consent...
People clearly have consented.
Obviously. They have allowed these things to continue, and that is why we need to start speaking up about these issues.
If they remove your consent and they don't have the power anymore?
If we remove our consent, then they don't have the power. Now, that's easier said than done.
I don't think you're going to get enough people to care.
Well, that's the more difficult situation now. In Oklahoma, we have some tools that would allow a minority to actually have a say.
Well, don't tell anyone about this.
But on the federal level, we need to figure out what we're going to do in order to get some tools involved, so that we, as individuals who are harmed, can get rid of these people who are harming us. And they're generally in black robes.
Now, what was the situation, what was the court ruling, or the court case, rather, with the fellow that had, like, the wheat fields? He had the 17 acres or something. Or, no, it's a ruling that you can't have any more than 17 acres.
19 acres.
19, that's ridiculous.
And it was back in 1937. It was under FDR. He made a decree. He was trying to stabilize the economy and stabilize the wheat market. And so he decreed you couldn't grow any more than 19 acres. And if you did, if you grew more than that, you would be fined.
So this fella had like 32 acres or something.
Correct. And all to feed his chickens, because he was really a chicken farmer. But if you know about chickens,
is it his right to
cattle
have that
farming
many
or anything like that?
Did he need that many chickens?
Well, that wasn't covered under the law. So because this law was completely arbitrary, it dealt with wheat, nothing else.
But if he didn't need that many chickens, they could simply take them from him, correct? Or regulate the use.
According to the Supreme Court in Wickard v. Filburn, yes, they and Google Wickard v. Filburn, they could dictate to a farmer how much he could grow and how much he could sell.
Makes sense.
Without a major fine.
You centrally plan the economy, and it works out really well, just like Stalin centrally planned the Ukrainian market, wheat market, and nobody...
That was specifically, he was doing that specifically for genocide. He specifically did the Ukrainian one.
No, he said it was for their own good.
Well, that's what he sold it as.
Well,
but his specific purpose was genocide.
But he said that he was trying to help, and so I believe survivors, and he survived the Second World War, Joseph Stalin.
Yes, he did.
And he didn't even start it. He was attacked. He was a victim.
Yeah, he was.
And he was just trying to feed everybody. And so he just planned the wheat distribution and the food market in Ukraine, and 12 million people tragically died. Yeah. But we can do better here. We can do better.
But we're going to still use central planning. Yeah. The point was that this man, the wheat never really left his property. He might have had to drive it across a couple local roads to get it from one field to where he was feeding his chickens.
But he was participating in interstate commerce, it sounds like.
Actually, he wasn't. He was just growing his own wheat and using it for his chickens. Now, his chickens may have gone international or national or interstate,
right.
but not, or his eggs or whatever he was producing, but not the wheat itself. It just went from one part of his farm to another. But they said that he by his non-participation in interstate commerce, and the non-participation was the any acreage over 19 acres. He owed the interstate commerce that commerce somehow. That's how the federal government could come in and fine him.
Compelled to engage in interstate commerce.
Correct.
Kind of like being compelled in your speech, or compelled to buy health insurance, right?
Right. Well, exactly. In fact, that's the exact methodology that they used for Obamacare to justify Obamacare, that you were forced to participate because by being a member of the nation in whatever state, you are automatically a participant in interstate commerce, so they can regulate whatever.
And remember, guys, you're not allowed to be racist because of Congress's ability to regulate interstate commerce.
In part, I don't know. No, that's actually, I think, on the general welfare clause that they go for.
Well, the diners, right? I think the diners. So, in order to desegregate the diners, they said, well, you know, people come in from highways, so this is interstate commerce. Therefore, you cannot reject service to anyone because you're connected to a big interstate.
Here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing.
So government does good things.
Here's the simple thing about the difference between regulation and prohibition. Because regulation is basically just rules of the road, and also a differentiation between state and federal. The feds can say, look, you have to uphold the diners' rights and feed them when they come in. If you're open, you got to be open all. They can make that edict. The feds can make that. They can't go into the whole civil rights thing and making all these rules and regulations, other than you have to treat everybody equally. But they put that on the states, and the states then have to figure out, how do we come up with rules that actually make this happen? And that's the regulations. Think the basic rules of the road. Those are regulations. Everybody can travel under the basic rules of the road. We travel on the right. In England, they travel on the left. We have, at a four-way stop, the guy on the right goes first and then moves around in order. Why? So that everybody can exercise their rights.
I thought we established that driving on the road, owning an automobile, these things are privileges, and that's why you can be compelled to buy automobiles.
Well, if you believe that government is the holder of rights and not the individuals, and that rights are top down from government.
I mean, unless you're a silly person that thinks that the right to own an automobile is covered under the 9th Amendment.
Well, yes, it's covered under the 9th Amendment.
But hold on, the government owns the roads because they constructed them. So they can dictate to you what they've done with your money.
Except the government is us, so we own the roads.
I gotcha.
So we paid for them because the government doesn't have anything that isn't ours.
Guys, listen, David is a traveler. Do not mess with him. He's traveling. Just kidding. I think we're going to wrap it up. It's been awesome. We've learned a lot. I'd love to have David on again. I'll ambush him while we're filming to get a quick commitment. You're going to come on again?
I will.
All right, awesome.
I love it.
Well, I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you caught some of the humor.
Hope we didn't bore you.
Yeah, I hope we didn't bore you, and we'll see you next time.
Is your kitchen looking sad these days? Are you tired of looking at that old, dated bathroom? From rooftops to those unsightly holes in the walls, Complete Contracting has got you covered. Call 405-676-0595 today to schedule an estimate. Once again, that number is 405-676-0595. And remember, Complete Contracting has the contracting expertise for all your renovation and repair needs.